perspective on the readings for today. I met Cameron outside of Streetside Cafe. My wife and Alicia and I had just finished lunch. Cameron sat down next to us, and as she began to prepare herself to open her laptop, she spoke to Alicia and I. Cameron was 51, intelligent, and attractive. She was from Dallas, Texas. She was an attorney, and she was working remotely in Paris for a month. Without much prompting, she began to share her story with us. She shared that she had spent most of her life working every week for 100 hours or more per week. In her words, she had given up everything in her pursuit to become a well-respected attorney. In her words, she gave up family, friends, dating, exercise, and even her faith. While she was not resentful, I sensed a whisper of regret in her voice. Initially, I felt profound sadness for her. Then my heart was filled with gratitude. Clearly, Cameron was having an epiphany about work. She was in the midst of this transformation. God was filling her with His grace. There was joy radiating from Cameron, and I recall she said she even had a date that night. God was transforming Cameron's life, and He wants to radically change our lives. Now, the Gospel from Luke is a familiar story about Martha and Mary, and it's easy to simplify it and see it simply as a dichotomy between Martha and Mary, between work and rest, between sitting and serving. But I'd like to invite you this morning to go deeper than that. In the Gospel, Jesus appears in the village. Martha welcomes Him, but then immediately goes to work. Mary, on the other hand, sits at the foot of Christ and listens to Him while He speaks. Martha works to serve, which is a good thing. But note what her efforts bear. They bear a meal of bitterness, resentfulness, worry, and anxiety. Contrast that with the first meeting. Here the Lord appears to Abraham, who is at rest for a moment, sitting outside his tent. In that moment of tranquility, Abraham looks up, and he notices these three men coming towards him. Notices something extraordinary about them. He runs to them and bows before them. What comes next is notable. Abraham asks if he can serve the men. Abraham asks, "Let water be brought to you. Let me get you a little bit of food." Abraham consults with the three men before he goes to work. Abraham asks before he acts. So instead of a meal of resentment, anxiety, and worry, the three men get fresh baked bread and a choice steer. They get Abraham's very best. Instead of being burdened, Abraham and Sarah are blessed. I wonder if that's the invitation for us today. Rather than choosing between Martha and Mary, work and rest, service and servitude, perhaps we are invited to simply be present for a moment and ask the Lord for his wisdom, his strength, and his grace. Yes, we are called to work and serve in this lifetime. As students, we put our efforts into our studies so that we can go off to college and pursue a career or a trade. As breadwinners, we do need to provide for our families. As parents, we need to be there for our children. As we age, we're often asked to care for elderly parents or a spouse with an illness. However, our culture values excellence above all else, individualism and materialism. This programs us to act, not ask, to keep our head down rather than looking up, to do it on our own rather than seeking help, to never be satisfied and always strive for more. However, we can be countercultural. We have this thing called free will. We can make choices. We can choose whether to take on another AP class. We can choose whether to sacrifice everything like Cameron did for that next promotion. We can choose to sign up our children for one more activity for the fear of them missing out. We can elect to go it alone or to take care of the caregiver. In discerning life's choices, how often do we do what Mary did and sit for a while at the feet of Christ? Do we ever ask before we act, like Abraham did? And once we do act, do we ever seek God's blessings on the work we are about to undertake? God and all his graces can never be taken from us. He is everywhere and anywhere. We can find him in prayer. We can find him in nature. We can find him here at the Mass. We can find him in the silence of our hearts. Our challenge is to do what Abraham did. Take a moment, rest, and look up. Of course, at times we will feel burdened, anxious, and worried. However, with Christ at our center, we will find blessings. I conclude by sharing my second encounter, this time with a woman named Faustina, a woman who put Christ at the center of her life and whose work was radically transformed. On a wall at the Divine Mercy Shrine, I found these very words of Faustina. At midday, as I was examining my conscience, I complained to God about my failing strength. Then I heard these words in my soul. From today on, you will have no difficulty at all. I shall reinforce your strength. In the evening, when it was time to drain the potatoes, I was the first one there, confident in the words of the Lord. I had no trouble with lifting the pot and managed to drain off the water quite easily. But when I lifted the lid to let the steam out, instead of potatoes, I saw sprays of indescribably beautiful red roses in the pot. I heard the voice in my soul saying, I am turning your hard work into bouquets of the most beautiful flowers, and their fragrance is rising up to my throne.